The whole world is seichel. The Rambam calls them sichli ibn Nivdalim. The Rambam holds that Malachim exist forever, from before and from after, and they're very, very smart guys. But there's a difference. The smartest Malachim try to understand what God is. The Malachim who are significantly less smart are trying to understand what God is not. And the argument is that if you're understanding what God is, you're understanding Him better. But you're not understanding Him. You're understanding your God. You're understanding the Eibush as it relates to you and no more. When you're understanding the Eibush by saying what He is not, so you're not understanding Him as well, but you're closer to the truth. And that's the difference between Srafim and Eifanim. The Malachim that are called Srafim, they understand Hashem directly. They're so smart, they want to understand Hashem. But what they end up understanding is only their source, their immediate source, and when they go a little bit higher, they burn up. The Malachim that are called Eifanim are at a much lower level, they're much less smart. So they're not trying to understand what Hashem is, they're trying to say what is God not. And the Maimer argues that the Eifanim are trying to say what God is not. Actually, they don't understand it as well, but they're closer to the truth. That's the spirit of the first Bracha of Krias Shma. Our Maimer, in the text, then jumps to Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Which means our Maimer skips a bunch of stuff. So in the class that we had last Thursday, we discussed what the Maimer doesn't discuss. That's what we did. In other words, we finished the sugya of the first Bracha of Krias Shma. We, as a group, are ready to go on to discuss Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, the highest level of understanding of the course. But we interrupted reading what's written in the text of the Maimer to give an oral lecture, to give a discussion Baal Peh about the first Bracha of Krias Shma and about the second Bracha of Krias Shma, because our Maimer doesn't go into anything other than the discussion on the Malachim. So before we go to this page, which is a review of the questions, I am going to just tell you a statement, okay? The first Bracha of Krias Shma is very long. The first Bracha of Krias Shma is 2 whole pages. It starts underneath Yishtabach Yetzirei Devei Cheshach Eis Hashem Uvedes HaKol, and it finishes Yetzir HaMeres. It's literally 2 whole pages long in the standard Lubavitch Nusach. In the newer Siddurim, it may be more, it may be less. And if you look carefully at that long Bracha of Krias Shma that we say in the morning, you speak about 3 things. Number 1, you speak about the heavens, the stars, the constellations, and what they like to call the orbits, right? The stars means individual stars, constellations means groupings of stars, and the orbits means the space in which the stars revolve. I think that one of the words that you could use for orbits, and I know this is a simplification because it's much more complicated than that, is what we would call galaxies, units of space that hold stars. So in the first part of the first Bracha of Krias Shma, we talk about the stars and the constellations and the Galgalim. The middle of the first Bracha of Krias Shma, we talk about the Malachim, different kinds of Malachim. And the last part of Birchas Krias Shma, the first Bracha of Krias Shma, in my opinion, and this is really my opinion, you finish talking about the physical universe, you finish talking about the spiritual Malachim, you start talking about the Sefiros. I believe that all those expressions, Beidei Refuos, Neda Sehilas, Adena and Neflois, all of those, Zriyat Sokes, Miach Yeshuas, Beidei Refuos, Neda Sehilas, are discussions about the Sefiros. And the second Bracha of Krias Shma is about Neshamos Yisroel. That's how you understand it. Okay, so to generalize, in Birchas Krias Shma and Krias Shma, you're using your brain, not your heart. You're trying to understand. The first Bracha of Krias Shma, you're trying to understand 3 things. You understand the nature of the physical heavens, In the middle, you want to understand the nature of the Malachim. And in the last third, if I'm not incorrect, you're trying to understand the nature of the 10 Sefiros, which are godly as opposed to separate. In the second Bracha of Krias Shma, you're trying to understand Neshamos, Ava Selam Avtanu, Adeshem Elokeinu Chem Lo Gedel V'Seder Chamalta Aleinu. The second Bracha of Krias Shma is about the Jewish people. Meaning, in the first Bracha, you're understanding Hashem through 3 separate entities, the worlds, the Malachim, and the Sefiros. The second Bracha of Krias Shma is trying to understand the Eibishter based on who we are. And when you get to Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, here you're talking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu without any context. You're not talking about Hashem as he's juxtaposed against the world, against the Malachim, against the Sefiros, or against the Neshamos Yisroel. You're speaking about the Eibishter himself. So you're climbing a ladder. You're going from step to step. There's a series of steps in Seichel itself. To understand the Hashem from the physical universe, to understand the Hashem from the Malachim, to understand the Hashem from the Sefiros, to understand the Hashem from Neshamos Yisroel, and then you want to understand the Hashem, period. Havaya Lakeinu Havaya Echad. That's the journey. So let's go to our list of questions. Question 250. How do a Fanim understand Hashem? And the answer is, they understand Hashem by asking, what is God not? They're not saying, what is God? Yes. They're not saying Hashem is smart and kind. They're saying Hashem is not physical. And he's not bound by time. And he doesn't have this limitation, doesn't have this limitation. When you're understanding something indirectly, it's called Yediyas Hashlila, knowing it indirectly. When you're trying to know something indirectly, you don't know it well. Because to know something well, you have to know it directly. God is smart. God is kind. God appreciates music. God appreciates good smell. God appreciates good taste. He put these things into his creation. But when you try to understand Hashem indirectly by saying what God is not, you're not understanding him that well. However, look at question 251. So what are they actually understanding? A fanim never have a direct understanding of what the Eibishter is. But by saying a series of what Hashem is not, although they never fully understand him, what they understand is actually closer to the truth than what the Srafim understand. And like I told it to you in class, this is a Rambam that the Rebbe quotes. It's a very important Rambam. The Rambam discusses this at length. The Rambam discusses this question of Yediyas Achiv and Yediyas Hashlil at length. If you want to understand something directly, you have to be able to see it. Hashem you cannot see, so you can't understand him directly, you can only understand him indirectly, and the Rambam writes, when you understand something indirectly, you don't understand it very well, but, this is the quote, Kol sheyarbe b'shlileis yiskarev elachiyas. Here, if you have somebody trying to study, and you could say one nut about it, it's not apple pie. You understand it in a very limited way. But if you could say a second nut, it's not grape juice, and the third nut, it's not a chair. Now, of course, you understand how simplistic the examples that I'm giving are. The more nuts, the more NOTs you add to the thing you're trying to understand, the closer you come to a yes. The more negative things you could say about understanding something, the closer you come to knowing what it is directly, but you never get there. The more things you could say about Hashem, Hashem is not this, Hashem is not this, Hashem is not this, you're closer and closer to understanding what he is. But as long as you're saying what he's not, you don't understand him directly, you're just getting closer to understanding him directly, and you never reach it. Now, question number 252. How is this connected to the Pasuk, Baruch Kved Hashem B'Mkeimei? How is this connected to the Pasuk, Baruch Kved Havayim B'Mkeimei? The answer is, you're saying B'Mkeimei. B'Mkeimei means his place, wherever he is. Wherever Hashem is. Hashem is wherever he is. I don't know where he is. But Mimkaimai, I'm reaching to him. And because I'm not defining what Hashem is, I'm simply saying that wherever he is, Baruch, so we're not defining him directly, we're defining him indirectly. It's Baruch, we're bringing down Kved Hashem, the glory of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Mimkaimai, from wherever his place is. And the reason we're saying Mimkaimai from wherever his place is, because we're not understanding what he is, we simply know that he's out there. Okay? Okay, next question. What does Targum Yonis Ben Azil say about Kved Havaya? The word kavod, as a rule, means a lavush. The word kavod means a garment. That's what the word means. Kavod usually means a garment, a secondary garment. In the Rishonim, the word kavod is called ziv yakare, the array of Hashem's glory. The Targum Yonason makes an exception when he says that when you have the word kavod by itself, it means ziv yakare. When you have the word kavod with Havaya, the Targum Yonason says you read it Yakare Havaya without ziv. That's the chiddush of the Yonason. Yonason Ben Azil is the oldest sefer of Torah Shabbat Peh that we have. The Yonason Ben Azil is before the Mishnayos, times of the second Beis Hamikdash. So he translates the word kavod as ziv yakare, Kved Havaya as yakare without ziv, meaning the word kavod by itself means a trace of godliness. Kvei Davaya means godliness itself. So Chassidus brings this to explain that when the Ifanim say Baruch, Kvei Davaya, Mim Koimai, there's two points that are being made. Number one, the word Mim Koimai, that because they're saying from its place, without specifying where the place is, we're not saying what the Eibishter is, we're just saying that whatever he is, he should come forward. And by saying Kvei Davaya, as opposed to Kvei Stam, Kvei Davaya, the Yitargem Yenisam Azil translates to mean Yekare Davaya, that means the glory of Hashem, as opposed to Ziv, a ray of the glory of Hashem, Baruch, to bring down. Sorry?
They said it was godliness.
Yekare means godliness, but the highest levels of godliness. Okay. Yes, I'm gonna stick to that translation. Ziv Yekare means a trace of the glory of Hashem, and Yekare means the glory of Hashem, meaning to say, Ziv Yekare would mean godliness as it's reduced, like the Srafim are understanding, and Yekare means as godliness is by itself.
So you're saying the pure godliness by itself?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, Baruch Hashem. Thank you for getting up in the morning. Okay, so you have the stories with the Rebbe. You know the stories with the Rebbe? Yehuda Avner has his story. The Rebbe spoke to thousands of people for thousands of hours. And many of the people that the Rebbe spoke to, we talked to in the middle of the night. Kipshute, in the middle of the night. 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. And sometimes people were tired. I mean, you all know the famous story with Label Groner, so Lichting Gan Eden, that a guy went into Yechidus and he's not coming out. And Rabbi Groner stood by the door, and there's a whole line of people waiting. So he opened the door. The guy had fallen asleep at the Rebbe's desk. He fell asleep. He'd been standing in the hallway. He finally got himself a chair. He sat there. He fell. So the Rebbe took out a Gemara. He didn't want to disturb him. And the Rebbe's learning, so the poor guy could take a nap in the Rebbe's room. And of course, Label woke him up probably quite abruptly. But the Rebbe said, I don't want to disturb a Yid from sleeping. So many a person came into the Rebbe's room tired. Now, you always used to walk out and say, he's wide awake. He's wide awake. No one understood how the Rebbe was wide awake. And Derech Agav, while I'm telling you this story so that I'll get your attention, Rabbi Label Groner once fabrengt here in this yeshiva. And he told us the following. I have the audio tape of it, but in the tape you're not going to hear what he demonstrated. Rabbi Groner would walk into the Rebbe and say to the Rebbe, Yechidus is over. And the Rebbe would ask him, there's no more people? Everybody's finished, but no more people. The Rebbe would stand up. The Rebbe would do this and sit back down and then get up again. That's how the Rebbe would finish Yechidus. Label would walk into the Rebbe and tell the Rebbe that Yechidus was over. The Rebbe would ask him, everybody's done? There's nobody left? He would stand up. The Rebbe would stand up, stretch out his hands and plop down in his seat and then stand up a second time. That's how the Rebbe finished Yechidus. Anyway, but many a person came into the Rebbe's room tired. First of all, the Rebbe had a magical skill. When you walked into his room, he brought you into your level, his level. Meaning, so many people walked into the Rebbe so nervous, they had no idea how they were going to talk, they had no idea how they were going to remember what the Rebbe said. As soon as they walked into that room, they were unbelievably calm. The Rebbe's presence took you over. When you were in his cheder, you were an extension of him. And he made it so easy for you to be with him, and he also made it so easy for you to remember what he said. And he woke you up. But sometimes he didn't wake you up. So Yehuda Avner has a story. I'm sure this happened 10 times. Yehuda Avner has a story that he walked into the Rebbe as the shliach of the Prime Minister of Israel, Menachem Begin, to talk about very serious business. He wasn't coming into the Rebbe's room to talk about his grandmother's pimples. He was talking about the whole matzav of Eretz Yisrael. It was very, very serious stuff. And Avner says, I'm tired. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm tired. And I was wide awake. So he tells the story that he has a note, a paper, and he's reading from notes. The Rebbe doesn't interrupt him once. He tells the Rebbe everything he has to tell him as the shliach of the Prime Minister of Israel at the time. And then the Rebbe starts asking him questions. And the Rebbe sees that he's falling asleep. So the Rebbe changes the subject in the middle. Reb Yehuda, ata makir oisonu kol koch. You understand, you know us so well, how come you're not one of us? In other words, you've been hanging around Lubavitch so long, how come you're not a Lubavitcher?
What? What's this? He's like English?
The Rebbe spoke Ashkenazi, he didn't speak Sfaradi. So he tells the Rebbe...
I'm saying the guy, the minister, is he like English?
He's English, yeah. So he tells the Rebbe, because there's people in my family who attribute to the Rebbe things that the Rebbe doesn't attribute to himself. So the Rebbe says to him in Hebrew, again, evidently there are people who still need crutches. So what the Rebbe did was he woke him up. As soon as he was awake, they went back to the original conversation. I don't even know if he makes the connection, but he tells the story that they're in the middle of talking and the Rebbe sees that he's falling asleep. So the Rebbe says, okay, if I'm talking to a person about serious things and he has to remember what I tell him and he has to be sharp, I got to wake him up. I was once at a Fabreng where the Rebbe apparently saw that the Chevra were falling asleep. So in the middle of a Sikha, the Rebbe said that in the Gemara it says that Rabbi Akiva was once giving a shir to his Talmidim, and the Talmidim were falling asleep. So Rabbi Akiva says right in the middle of the shir that there was a lady in Mitzrayim who once had 600,000 babies in one pregnancy. So they all sat up. 600,000 babies in one pregnancy. 6 in one pregnancy is also hard to understand, but 600,000 babies. So after they all sat up, he said, yeah, what are you talking about? Yocheved had a boy named Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was the Nasi Ador, Nasi Huakel. Bottom line is they were awake. Question 254. What are the 3 parts of the first Bracha of Krias Shma? The answer is, number 1, discussing the stars, the heavens, the physical heavens, the stars, the constellations, and the orbits. Number 2, angels, Malachim, that are metaphysical, right? I told you the magic word for Malachim is Nivdolim. Nivdolim means 2 things. Number 1, they're separate from physicality, especially according to the Rambam, who holds that they have no physicality whatsoever. And number 2, Nivdolim, that they're separate from Elokus. Malachim are not godliness, they're spiritual, but they're not godly, they're creations. Malachim have limitations, Malachim could make mistakes, and Malachim could have conflict. You put 2 Malachim in the same room. There's a Gemara that says there was a guy named Matat. Matat was mentioned in the Chitas of Shishi of last week. Matat is begematria Shin Daled Yud. Matat Roin. Shmi Kishvem Rabbe. And the Gemara says that Matat said something about the Eibishter, which was true, but not the whole truth. So they took him out of the Beis Shamayla, and they gave him 60 lashes of fire. And they bring a raya from this that Malachim are not perfect and not exact. The answer to your question, Shimshon, is Malachim don't ever do anything wrong. But their degree of exactitude, their degree of precision is limited. Like the mashal I give from a ruler. Can a ruler ever be 100% exact? And it's impossible. Some rulers are exact to the inch. Some rulers are exact to the centimeter. Some rulers are exact to the millimeters. Some rulers are exact to the micrometer. A micrometer, it's 100 millionth or a billionth of a millimeter. It's a tiny, tiny measure. But if you would go even smaller, you'd have an inexactitude. Right? I'll give you a shtickle Chumash Rashi, to cover today's shir. In last week's parsha, it says in the pasuk that Moshe Rabbeinu divided the blood in half. There's a very, very weird Rashi. It says in the pasuk, "Vayikach Moshe chatzi adam." Moshe took half the blood and he sprinkled on the people. Amaysim mitachatos mitashlomim. So Rashi says, "Mi cholkei," who divided the blood in half? And for the Rashi, "Bo malach v'cholkei." An angel came and divided the blood in half. Question: why do you have to have a malach to divide blood in half? The answer is because the Torah says half. It doesn't mean approximately half. It means exactly half. It's impossible. A malach divided it. Now, why could a malach divide it? Because a malach is ruchnius. And when a malach, which is ruchnius, relates to gashmius, the spiritual malach can have exactitude on the physical level. But in the world of malachim, there's no such thing as perfect. The only way to be perfect is to be God or godly. Now, why is godliness perfect? Because you're connected to God. Malachim are not godly. They're spiritual, but they're not godly. So malachim don't do things wrong. But they cannot be more perfect than their ruler is. Right? Today they have surgeons who do arthroscopic surgery and laser surgery, and the measure of exactitude is unbelievable. But they will never be perfect. It's impossible. Right? They can cut in a space which is 100 millionth of an inch. But at a billionth of an inch, you'll see, it could have been here, could have been here, could have been here, and he didn't do it exact. Perfection cannot be unless you're connected to God. Malachim are not perfect. You got it? Okay. So again, let's go over it again. The first part of Krias Shma is about the physical stars, the constellations, the stars, the orbits. The second part of Krias Shma is about the Malachim. And the third part of Krias Shma, this I invented. Honestly, I invented it. It would be nice if I actually took out Sefiros and looked inside to see what he has to say. The third part of Krias Shma, the first Bracha of Krias Shma is about the Sefiros. Okay? And this is what I taught you in the previous shiur. And we're going to go through it. 255, okay? Explain A, B, C, D. Okay? Everybody pay attention. This is a lesson in Siddur. This is not Maimed, this is a lesson in Siddur, so everybody's in the same place when it comes to this. This is a review of what I taught you on Thursday. I'm teaching it to you again. This is what we do. We learn it, and then we read the questions, and we do it a second time. So here we go. I'm going to start with an introduction. And I told this to you on Thursday also. Once upon a time, there was a Yidei the Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal Shem Tov traveled. And the Baal Shem Tov had a special nose for market days. Right? Baal Shem Tov had a special machine where he would smell out where Jews would gather in large congregations, and the Baal Shem Tov would make a beeline for that place, because he wanted to find as many Yidden together in one place, to be makar of them, to be ma'oider them, to be ma'oided them, to lift them up, and so on and so forth. So Baal Shem Tov had a habit of coming to markets, and he would go over to random Jews who were schlepping chickens or eggs or milk or butter, and he'd say with his Shalom Aleichem, was machta Yid, how are you? And the Baal Shem Tov did it because he simply wanted to hear Yidden say Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem, Geleib dem Eibishten, Geben soll sein der Heilige Hashem, and all the Yiddish expressions that they had in the 18th century, 17th century in Poland. So the Baal Shem Tov came to a particular market, and he was going around and asking people how they are. And then the Baal Shem Tov heard that near that market there's a shtibel. And in that shtibel there's a Parish. Parish means a Jew. They translate English as an ascetic. A Yid who has completely separated himself from the world. He sits a whole day and a whole night and learns and davens. Some of them would literally put cotton in their ears so they shouldn't hear anything, cotton in their noses so they shouldn't smell anything, blinders over their eyes so they shouldn't see anything, and they would sit and learn Teda Bal Peh. So the Baal Shem Tov went to see this Parish. So he comes into the shtibel and he had to wake him up from his seclusion, to get to open his eyes and take something out of his ears. They told this Parish that there's a holy Jew named Yisrael Baal Shem Tov who's here. So the Parish agreed to engage with the Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal Shem Tov said to the Parish, "Was machst du? How you doing?" And the Parish got very upset and insulted. And he said, "Listen to me, I'm not a prostarid, I'm not an Amoritz. I'm a Ben Teda, I'm a Talmud Chacham, I'm a yeshiva man. If you want to know how people are doing, go out into the market. There's plenty of bored souls who'll spend all day long telling you how they're doing. I am a masmid, I don't waste a second of my time. I have no time for this salutations and greetings. Was machst du?" So the Baal Shem Tov gave him a very strange answer. The Baal Shem Tov said to him in Yiddish, "Was nimmst du zu bei dem Eibishten sein Parnasse?" Why are you depriving God of his livelihood? Why are you depriving Hashem of his Parnasse? This is what the Baal Shem Tov said to the Parish. So the Parish antennae were peaked. What does that mean, depriving Hashem of Parnasse? He never heard such a thing. If I don't say Baruch Hashem, I'm taking Hashem needs Parnasse, Hashem needs to eat, the same old questions everybody asks all the time. So the Baal Shem Tov finish a pasuk. We say it every single day. Ata Kodesh. You're removed from the world. Kodesh means removed. Yoshev, what makes you sit? Tehillas Yisrael, on the praise of the Jewish people. When Yidden say Baruch Hashem, they bring Hashem closer to the world. That's Hashem's Parnasse. Hashem's Parnasse means He wants to come closer to us. Va'ata Kodesh, you by yourself are removed from the world. Tehillas Yisrael, the praise of the Jewish people. So on that basis, Rabbi Isai, I explained to you A and B. Look inside. Lakel is the first of the Yud Midas Rachmim, right? Hashem, Kel, Rachim, V'chanan. We hold that Hashem is before the Yud Midas Rachmim. Kel is the first of the Yud Midas Rachmim. Baruch, it says in Zohar, means Chochma. Baruch ihu Chochma. Bracha ihi nukva. Chochma is called Baruch. So Lakel, which is the first of the Yud Midas Rachmim, is basically Keser, and Baruch is Chochma. Lakel Baruch the Imes Yiteinu. The Jewish people have to give Kel and Baruch sweetness. Yidden have to give Kel and Baruch. Kel is the first of Yud Midas Rachmim, and Baruch is Chochma. We have to give them sweetness. Why? You'll see in a minute. La Melech, Kel Chai. Melech is Malchus and Kel Chai is Yesod. Okay, that's the fact, okay? Just Kel Choy is Yisoid. Shaddai is Yisoid and Kel Choy is Yisoid. La Melech is Malchus and Kel Choy is Yisoid. Zemira is Yemeru v'Tishbachas Yashmiu. To Malchus and Yisoid we have to give Zmiris and Tishbachas. So here we are, there's Sefiros of Atzilus, represented by the word Kel and Baruch and Melech and Kel Choy, and we're giving them something. To Kel and Baruch we're giving the Imes. To Melech and Kel Choy we're giving Zmiris and Tishbachas. Farvas, look at the third one. See, Kihu levade morim v'kodesh. The Eibush that by himself is removed from the world. That's the title of the words. Ki, because who the Eibush that levade by himself is removed from the world. So you start off the third part of the first Bracha of Krias Shma saying you didn't have to give the Sefiros of Atzilus gifts, offerings. What's the reason to give Kel and Baruch Ne'imes? What's the reason to give Melech and Kel, Chai, Zmiris and Tishbachas? You know why? Because godliness has nothing to do with the world. Kihu, because he, Levade, by himself, is Morim, is exalted, V'Kodesh and holy. In other words, we're complementing the Sefiros of Atzilus to bring him towards us. We give Kel and Baruch Ne'imes to bring them closer to us. We give Melech and Kel, Chai, Zmiris and Tishbachas to bring him closer to us. Ki, because who, the Eibush, by himself, is Morim, V'Kodesh, is removed from the world. So you say to Kel and Baruch Ne'imes, you say to Melech and Kel Chai Zmiris and Tishbachas, and after you praise them and you bring them closer to us, then you say Zmiris Yemeru and Tishbachas Yashmiu. I'm sorry, Peil Gevures, Chadoshes, Baal Mochames. This is calling to the Sefiros of Atzilus to give us ashpois. That's just what number D is. Peil Gevures, Chadoshes. C is Kiul Avad Manam Kodesh. Hashem by himself is removed from the world. You have to bring him closer. And Peil Gevuras, Eizach Hadashas means you're, so to speak, calling the Lakus to give you all kinds of brachas. Each one is a double lashon. Peil Gevuras, Eizach Hadashas, Baal Mochames, Re'ez, Zakas, Mechashu, it's better for us. There's a reason why. Because one midah by itself is infinite. Chesed by itself is infinite. And if Chesed by itself is infinite, infinity is as useless as nothing. Infinity and zero could be the same number. From infinity you can't get anything. Could you draw a cup of water out of an infinite body of water? If it's truly infinite, you have no connection. So each one has to be reduced. How do you reduce the infinity of Chesed? You mix it with Gevura. How do you reduce the infinity of Gevura? You mix it with Netzach. It's called Gvuli Alachsan. You mix a midah with an opposite. So you make the midas less. So we get a hashpah. That's the pshat in these words. Peil Gevura is every the double lashon, Pu'ula and Gevura. Asiya and Chidush, Baal Mechames, Re'et, Tzakit, each one of those double Lashenes is reducing what the Ein Seif is by itself, that we should get a hashpah from it. And that's the pshat of the third part of the first Bracha of Krias Shma. So the way I'm presenting it to you is, the first Bracha of Krias Shma has three sections. The first section is the lowest section, the middle section is higher, the last section is the highest. The first section of the first Bracha talks about the stars, the physical universe. The second talks about Malachim, the third talks about Sefiros. And when it comes to Sefiros, we say, Levadei Morim v'Kodesh. They have no connection to us. So we have to be Ne'imes Yiteinu, and Zmiris and Tishbachas Yemedu and Yashbiu, to bring them closer to us, and then they'll give us Ashpah, Peil Gevuras, Eizach Hadash, Baal Mochames, and so forth and so on. Questions or comments?
You said that you have to mix spirits in order to make it less infinite, and you gave example water that's infinite. But it takes water's infinite and still gaining out of it.
The true statement is there's no such thing as infinite water. It cannot be. Because water is made up of individual parts. Infinity is not a collection of finite parts. Infinity is different quality. I had a mashpia who was very simple, but he taught me a lot because he was simple. And one of the things he told me, I'm sure I heard it from Rabbi Yael, if you have an infinite pile of apples and you add one, do you have more? If you have an infinite pile of apples and you remove one, do you have less? But you took one off. And the answer is you cannot remove an apple from an infinite pile of apples. It can't be. No. Infinity that's made up of finite parts is a theory. It can never happen. Because you can always add more. If you could put one more apple on that pile, it's not infinite. So infinity is really one. Infinity is not made of parts. So it has no connection to anything but itself. So that's why you have to reduce it by a counterpart. You follow?
Infinity
two infinities?
Because they have a midah, because they have a character. Okay, these are very good questions, but we'll leave it for now. It's called chitzonius amidas. You have in Kabbalah, you have Gimel Oimos, Sheva Kfules, and Yud Beis Pshutas. There's three mothers, which is Chabad. Sheva Kfules, the 7 doubles. This is the 7 midas as they are by themselves. And Yud Beis Kfules means 12 doubles. What's 12 doubles? 6 times 2. How each one is connected to its counterpart. Huh? Because each one exists with another side. It's Chesed with Gevura. It's 6. There's 3 dimensions, right? If there's 3 dimensions, there's 2 edges.
They're originally together because we can only see them together.
I'm going to have to say yes, but I'm not comfortable with the yes, but I'm saying yes anyway. It's called Chitzonius Amidas. Primius Amidas, each midas by itself. It's called Shiva Kfulas. Each one is double, but double doesn't mean with the counterpart, it's by itself. The Shiva Kfulas means the midas as they are by themselves. Yud Beis Pshutas means how each midas mixed with the midah Hofches. So it's actually 6 times 2. Chesed with Hoid, for example. It's Chesed with Hoid and Hoid with Chesed. That's 2 Pshutas. 2 blends. Okay, shall we? 256. What is the second bracha of Krias Shma about? Chaver, the answer is Neshamos Yisroel, Jewish souls. The first bracha is about the Kechovim, the Galgalim, the Malachim, and the Sefiros. The second bracha is about Juif, Yidden. The second bracha is about Yidden. Now, Chaver, who remembers this? Please, somebody know the answer. What is special about Jewish souls? I remember saying this.
They have no floor, they have no ceiling.
Thank you very much. What is special about a neshama is different than the Galgalim and the Kechavim, than the Malachim, and even than the Sefiros. That they don't have a specific place. Right? Malachim live in Elam HaYetzirah. Sefiros live in Elam HaAsiyah. Kechavim and Galgalim live in Elam HaAsiyah. Where do the neshamas live? They can go anywhere. They don't have a constraint of location. A neshama could be in Atzilus, a neshama could be in Bria, a neshama could be Yetzirah, a neshama could be in Asiyah, a neshama could be the highest level, a neshama could be the lowest level. In fact, the way a neshama is defined, it can simultaneously be, at the same time, it can be the highest level and the lowest level at the very same time. So neshamas are unique in their ability to be everywhere. Malachim can't be everywhere. I mentioned this to you in the Shir, that it says in a lot of Rishonim, the Rambam for sure holds it, that a malach cannot come into a physical guf. Remember that? Which is why the Rambam holds that all of the descriptions of Malachim coming into the physical worlds are visions. Last night we talked about Bilam, yeah. According to the Rambam, the story of Bilam and his donkey never happened. It was a vision, it was a nevuah. Bilam fell on the ground, and he saw his donkey misbehaving, and he saw himself hit the donkey a bunch of times, and then he saw the Malach come along and castigate him for hitting the donkey, and the donkey saw more than he did. I think a part about the donkey dying that Rambam held physically happened. But all the rest of it was a vision. Why? Because the Rambam holds a malach cannot be physical guf, and the Ramban gets so upset at the Rambam. There's other cases also, but with one of those instances where the Ramban gets particularly upset at the Rambam. But the Rambam holds that a malach cannot be in a guf. The trademark of a neshama is there's no place it cannot go, because it includes the highest levels and the lowest levels. This is why Rabbi Sai, the first bracha of Krias Shma, speaks about the stars, the angels, the Sefiros are Lakus. And then you're going up, the neshamas are higher than Sefiros, yep. Because the Sefiros of Atzilus are only Atzilus in Atzilus. You take the Sefiros of Atzilus and put them into Bria and they become Atzias, they're not a Lakus. A neshama goes any place she wishes, or any place the Eibush wishes for her to go, and she remains godly. Reb Shalom in the back. I have to say thank you for coming. Thank you for staying awake. Thank you for being quiet. Thank you for paying attention. And thank you for asking a question. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai, Yechida. Go ahead.
If the whole thing with offering to the book is just a dream, why?
According to the Rambam. Because the Nevuah is real. Okay, Efshenisht. Maybe donkey did that. I think the Gemara speaks about it. The donkey died. The Rambam doesn't have to disagree with that. No, the point is the donkey embarrassed the person, even if nobody else saw. But we understand the story. Bilam is not walking alone. He's walking with Sari Moyav. He has a whole posse, a whole entourage of people. And then you see him acting really, really weird. He's hitting his animal. And then he's having a conversation with nobody. When the Bilam saw the Malach, the other people didn't see the Malach. They saw Bilam yapping to nobody. I mean, they knew he was weird, they just didn't know how weird. So the donkey had to die. Vasher Yisakal. Questions or comments? Okay, good morning to all of you. Chazak.